So if for any of you that are listening to this and you are feeling uncomfortable, you feel like there's this season, something's not working out, and this applies both personally and professionally, is sit in the disturbance and sit in silence.
The Workplace Therapist Show is brought to you by The Worksmiths, a leadership development firm specializing in executive coaching, team retreats, and leadership education. Contact The Worksmiths for all of your leadership development needs. This is the Workplace Therapist Show, and of course, I'm your host, Brandon Smith. And today's show, we're going to talk about leadership lessons, as is the theme of this year, but we're going to talk about it from a particular angle. What happens when you get promoted into that C-suite? What are some of the challenges and opportunities for us as we grow as leaders when we make that big move? So to guide us on this, I have an awesome guest, a good friend of mine.
Thanks, friend.
And Angela Raub, President and CEO of Leadercast.
Yes.
And so what I love about your role here today as a guest is you can not only share your journey at moving into that C-suite,
yes,
but gosh, you're President and CEO of Leadercast, so you're all about leadership. So we can look at it from lots of angles, what you see in other leaders as they make this transition as well.
It's a dream, and I'm just so glad to be here and so proud of you and how you impact the world. So it means a lot.
I don't
to
do
all
well
of
with
your
compliments.
Okay,
You're
just say
make me
thank
turn
you.
Red. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you
there
very
you
much. Let's move on.
All right, very good. Wow. So yes, what I love is in our friendship, Brendan, is that you've seen me at different junctures. You've seen me at a time of where I probably had less confidence. Even prior to me joining Leadercast, you know my journey, and our journeys in leadership are never what we think they're going to be. And so the last time I was on your show, I was our Chief Sales Officer at Leadercast and have since been in this role almost 18 months.
Wow.
And I have learned more about myself personally and as a leader in this time frame. And it's been a beautiful process, but I would tell you probably in the last 3 months is when I found my authentic self in just this absolutely wonderful surrendered place.
Yeah, so for the new listeners,
yes,
why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey? What was it that ultimately kind of has been your career path that got you into Leadercast? Share a little bit about what Leadercast does, and then let's really dive into this, like the last 18 months.
You've got it. So 2009, I was at a local university and thought I was walking into a promotion, and that was what the grapevine comported, which we know that they're always reliable. Gossip internally is always 100%. And as I walked into that conference room, I suddenly realized that the rest of my division showed up. And so it was timed perfectly, went through that. So the second worst depression in the U.S. as the world was experiencing it, and I lost my job. And I would have told you that would never have been the case. In that decade, really, if I look back on the last 11 years, I got thrown for an 8-year curve of realizing that I falsely validated myself through work and work cheers and accolades and making it happen. And I was just a mess. And I really didn't look at that. So I had different changes. I tried different things. I was always recruited into different positions. And so I diversified my experience, and people thought I was crazy for doing that. I remember there's a local woman that I see always at networking events that would say, "Now, where are you at? Where do you work?" And she's like, "Wow, you've got an interesting journey." And I really let that bother me for a long time. Now I seek her out because that doesn't define me, what other people do. But anyway, I
want to go back a minute. So that's an interesting strategy you took. You diversified. I love that idea. So what were you doing before? And then what did you say, gosh, I want to add some of this to my kind of toolkit in my resume to round me out?
Yeah, it was, my career is perfectly bifurcated between higher education. So I started in higher ed, undergrad, admissions, and financial aid. And so when I was at Georgia State running the MBA program, and I was over corporate relations at the time of the reduction in force, I levered my MBA. I had just completed the MBA program, and so I started working for a wealth management firm.
Oh, nice.
And so I did business development for them, working to bring in more high net worth clients. From there, I went to Hotel Equities, and so I was working for one of my EMBA classmates, Fred Cerrone, one of the best CEOs I've ever worked for. At Brightworth, I worked for one of the best CEOs, Ray Padron. So I had these men that were thrown in my life to lead and mentor me in leadership. And so from that, when I was at Hotel Equities, I went to a not-for-profit and did some things with women's initiatives, and again, used executive education. And when I was at Hotel Equities 8 years ago, we were a Leadercast host site.
Oh, wow.
In our corporate office, in our corporate learning center, and I fell in love in 3 minutes with Leadercast. And Bren, I would have not believed that this many years now I sit in this seat.
So great kind of segue for those folks who don't know what Leadercast is.
Yes.
And why don't you know what Leadercast is? But for those that don't, share a little bit about what the mission of Leadercast is.
I will. So Leadercast, we're almost a 20-year-old organization. We are transforming every day. We just went through a digital transformation. But we were founded by John Maxwell. So if anybody's read one of his 42 leadership books, again, a moment, I just can't look at these, what I would deem a God moment. When I graduated with my undergrad degree, someone gave me a book by John Maxwell that became the foundation of my leadership. And to lead a company that he thought of so many years ago is pretty incredible. So we hold 2 of the world's largest one-day leadership events. Our flagship program is coming up on May 7th. It's themed positive disruption. We have Magic Johnson on our stage, Bazoma St. John, who was at Uber when things went a little awry. We have Amy Jo Martin, who is Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's social media guru, and she has other very high. Shaq is one of her clients. I'm reading her book right now. It's amazing. We have Andy Stanley. We have Sangram Vagar. So it's an incredible cast. And we do that twice a year. And then our women's event will be in October. And I can't tell you, but we just signed 3 amazing speakers that I wish I could shout out, but I don't want my VP of operations to call here right now. So it's an incredible platform. And then so we will have people attend live. And many of our corporate clients, the Fortune 1000, will watch it internally, which right now, the world and the state that we're living in, we're seeing our corporate clients are expanding their licensing with us because they're restricting travel, but they can watch our event simulcast or rebroadcast it. So we provide, we're a platform of leadership development content.
I love that. Okay, so now now that everyone's got Leadercast and knows what it is, let's go back to your story. So then tell us about that, what got you into the company.
Okay.
And then ultimately, now those steps along the way as you ultimately ascended to president and CEO.
Okay. So prior to coming to Leadercast, they recruited me for 16 months. And so that was for enterprise sales. So it was a really long dance.
16 months, it's a long dating process.
It was a long dating process.
Wow.
Eight times of meeting with different people. But again, now I look at it in the surrendered state, and I look at each of those junctures, and it was beautiful. Went into it for interviewing for enterprise sales, so going in and selling all of our content that we have canned and on our leadership library called Leadercast Now. So go in the day that they offered me the job, and the CEO at the time is like, hey, I'd like to offer you the chief sales officer position. And I'm like, okay. So started an interview process under one guise and then got offered something totally different. And so the surrender process that I've realized, my dad has always said, put your head down for a decade at your job, not worry about anybody else, not worry about your own, just work hard and learn. And I look at that decade, and all these things started happening when I surrendered, when I really looked at myself, where I was falsely validating myself, and go to my car, burst into tears and call my daughter and say, they just offered me the chief sales officer position. I do not know what's happening right now. And we both had a great cry because of that victory. I'm sorry. So best laid plans, when you give those up, A philosophy I use now all the time is hands up and out. And it started. And I dug in at Leadercast. It's been 3 years. And 19 months ago, I sat in my car at Avalon here in Atlanta, Georgia, and was getting on an investor call and thought we were going to go over our pipelines and things like that. And 3 gentlemen were on the phone, and I was asked, we want you to run the company.
Wow.
And I sat silently with a lump in my throat like I have right now, and I said, okay, and sat. And it was probably 30 seconds, and finally someone, he was in Palm Springs, said, are you there? And I said, I am here. And he said, what do you think? And I said, okay. So I was going to meet with somebody from Ernst & Young they're a corporate client. And I walked in and I had tears in my eyes, and she's like, what, are you okay? Do we need to reschedule? And I said, no, I just got offered this job. And she's like, should we drink now? And I'm like, no, we shouldn't. But I think the greatest lesson I've learned as a leader is in 2009, walking into a room thinking one thing that I just knew was going to be happening and get pushed out of the sandbox. I mean, it was an ego. I couldn't make it home from downtown Atlanta, a place I drove to for 6.5, 7 years. I couldn't figure out how to drive home. And to look at where I am now. And so really when you just put your head down and you have your hands up and out, and don't hold things too tightly, is when this just all transpired. You know that 18 months ago, I called you and said, can I do this?
Yeah, I remember that.
And you said, you can do this. So the greatest leadership lessons that I've learned over the last 18 months is never, ever forget the strengths that each one of us brings to the table. Those strengths got you to the exact moment and place and position and influence that you were supposed to be in.
Yeah.
And that was like, okay, I'm really good at these things. Did I have some things to learn? Yes. I have 2 great investors in the company. One grew a multinational family-owned business. The other owns multiple businesses, but is more of a PE guy. 2 different philosophies. So I learn a lot whenever we have a meeting with them.
So I want to talk about some of the things you've learned in the last 18 months. But before we do that, let's talk about that moment when they offered you the job.
Okay.
Because I know you're not alone in this feeling. There's probably a part of you that was like, yes, I can do this. And there was a part of you that was like, I am not ready to do this.
Sure.
So how did you come to terms with that? And what would you say to someone who's listening right now that maybe is in that situation? They've got this opportunity, or someone's asking them to apply to something that's a stretch role. How do you wrestle with those 2 voices in our head?
It's a great question. I look at that moment, and I always thought a long time ago, I would have told you early in my career, I want to lead something. I mean, I love people. I love encouraging people. I love empowering people. But at that moment, I think I exemplified the Harvard business case about women and men, the difference of women won't apply for a job unless they think they're at 85%, like they could check 85% of the boxes that they're qualified. And a guy's like, oh, I'm 53, go for it. I can do this.
15.
Yeah, exactly.
7%.
5%, and incredible at self-promotion. I'm not bitter. But then, so I think that I had that moment where I'm just like, wait a second, and I was more, I got my MBA because I wanted to have more finance and accounting experience. And so that was the thing that when they made the answer or made the ask, that I went to that part of like, whoa, like I'm dealing with 2 men that have run significant businesses. And how do I fake some of that? I mean, you can read a P&L and you can, but what I've learned in cash management, what I've learned about in this transformation and investing in a digital transformation, they're priceless lessons. But they have been so graceful is that I am one that if I make a mistake, I raise my hand fast. And every time, 3 times, not significant, but still, I have been met with, what did you learn from that? Great. Okay, terrific. Thanks so much. We appreciate it. So acknowledge where you're weak. So I did at that moment, that played in my head, but be okay with that. all of us have that. And
Yeah.
so call it out and then learn from it. And that's been the greatest thing in the last, I shared with you, 4 months. I just have this absolute peace. My employees have said, like, what's up? I'm an intense person anyway, but I think intensity coupled with peace and confidence is a heck of a lot better than intense and feeling unsure and a little bit insecure in a new role.
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. It's funny when you were talking about that and you said, but then, these two guys that run all these businesses, and I thought you were going to say, if they believed in me, then I must be the right candidate. But that wasn't exactly what you said. You said, no, I'm kind of intimidated by that.
Yeah,
but you could look at it both ways. Here are these two people who are successful in business, and they saw that you were the right one for this role.
Well, because you're like, am I an imposter? And two people that are very well versed in this are going to tell me, oh, what the heck were we thinking? And it's been, and one in particular has become a very dear friend just because he's a great mentor and willing to talk about his own growth at maybe 70 years old. So
we're going to go into break. When we come back from break, I want to talk about a little more of some of the learnings then over those 18 months. Things that maybe were things that potential missteps, but also just growth opportunities. Things that you learned. You said, "Gosh, and what is different about that president CEO seat that maybe you didn't expect or anticipate?"
You got it.
I'm sure there
the
are
loneliness.
A couple. There's one.
There's one of them. You got it.
So we're going to go to break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Here's your coaching minute for the week, presented to you by the Leadership Foundry. So credibility, as we know, is super, super important. Let's say now you've gotten into a new job. You've either got a new boss or a new team, and you're trying to build credibility really, really quickly right out of the gate. One of the easiest ways to do that is focus on proactive communication. We all do the reactive communication stuff. People text us, IM us, email us, and we respond. Focus on proactive communication, particularly status updates. It's so simple and easy, but it's a great way to provide quick clarity into what you're working on and build credibility. And I find it to be the best way to enhance trust quickly with a new boss. So put on your calendar either every Friday or every Monday, typically the end or beginning of a week, to send to your boss what are maybe those 3 to 5 things you got accomplished during the week, and what are the 3 to 5 things that you're going to work on the next week. And you'll find after about 3 or 4 or 5 weeks of doing that with your new boss, that they'll say, hey, those were really great. You don't need to send those anymore. I really appreciate what you've been up to. So give it a try. It's a quick way to build credibility and enhance trust right out of the gate. Welcome back from break. Of course, this is the Workplace Therapist Show, and I'm your host, Brandon Smith. And so before break, I had my wonderful guest, Angela Raub, kind of talk about her journey to the C-suite.
Yes.
Okay, so now you've arrived.
Now I've arrived.
If you get into our story, you've arrived. You are now in the C-suite running the company.
Yes.
So that was 18 months ago.
Yes.
Tell us about some of the surprises or things that maybe you learned along the way that maybe you didn't anticipate. Because, there aren't too many times that folks from the C-suite really get a chance to be kind of honest about, what is that like? Because it's got to be different and in many cases harder than any other job they've had before.
It is. I think the thing for me in this season of really becoming comfortable with being still and being silent has been, it prepared me as well to be in the role, because it's certainly more lonely. Even though you have some team members that are on your executive team that you can share to a particular level to, then some things you can't. And I've had just a growth in really valuing even more my personal advisory board. What's interesting is my best friend since I've been 13 years old is a high school. She runs guidance for a school system and has no idea about really what my job is. But it's fascinating the growth that we've had in that relationship, because I can be authentically me since I've been 13 with this person that's like, you can do this, and know nothing else about it. So the loneliness factor, and then being okay with that. I look at, I do an exercise every day driving to my office where not only am I doing prayers of gratitude, but I pray and meditate over every child that has a parent working at my office, because my leadership is vitally important for a generation. And I'm not making that sound like some big narcissistic, like, it is not about me. But how I lead it does affect how someone goes home and how someone parents or how someone partners at home. And so I really take that into consideration all the time. But I pray over those kids, because that's a humbling aspect of how I lead, is that direct correlation.
So I almost put those two things together. So there is this loneliness piece, but there's this, what you didn't quite say explicitly, but I'm pulling from that is, as sitting in that leadership seat, you need to come up with your own philosophy of why are you there? What's the difference that you're trying to make? And you can't look to get it from somebody else, but what's the impact that you're trying to make? And what is that? And why does that mean something to you? Because that's, if you're going to really, truly pour your passion and energy and want people to feel committed to the organization, you have to too.
That's
so kind of defining what that is for you, which is somewhat of a lonely exercise, but an important one.
It is. And, the mission of Leadercast is to fill the world with leaders worth following. And I know that in preparing and going through the seasons that I've gone through as a leader, I'm very transparent about when I had big social media following and was validated by accolades and being pithy on comments on Facebook and having a ton of likes. And when I got pushed out of that sandbox, or when I was humbled, I look at the desire in me is to still make the world a better place through leadership, but to go through the exercise of being okay to be alone and be silent. My weekends are so great spending with a dog and long runs in my own mind. And so what felt lonely at first is now extremely comforting, as long as I think that you keep the mission and the people first.
Yeah.
Then it really comes to fruition and it doesn't feel lonely.
So I have a question for you.
I know, I'm scared because you said you had something earlier.
I've got lots.
Am I going to cry? I think I'll probably cry.
No, you might. I don't know. It's possible.
Okay.
So you talked a lot about just the, coming into your authentic self, really leading in an authentic way. And I totally get that. And yet in the seat you sit in, there's this thing we call executive presence. How do you navigate those two things? Because sometimes what you might want to say or how you might want to show up might not be consistent or congruent with the role that you're honoring.
I do know what
getting
you're
what I'm saying? Okay,
yeah.
so how do you wrestle with that? Because I have a lot of clients that when they move into those senior levels, it's like they're trying to figure that thing out, and they don't want to go too far in executive presence because it feels inauthentic or plastic.
Right.
But if they're too authentic, then they get dinged for that.
Yeah, that's been an area for me because I am so transparent where I will stop sometimes and, like, for example, we had an incredible sales day yesterday and I go through the office and was dancing like Elaine on Seinfeld. And I watched my
I know that dance.
That's and I was dance. Like going out and or doing other goofy things, and I'll watch some of the newer team members look at me and then I'm like, oh geez, did I just ruin something? But I think as long as I can go home at night and say I was authentically me, that I'm okay, if that makes sense. So driving down that road between executive presence and being authentic, gosh, Amy Jo Martin's book talks about, ask for forgiveness, be who you are, be bold. And so I'm not fearful of that. I know that when I go out and represent my team like today, I want them to hear this and say, heck yeah, that's us on the mic right now. We're in this together. But my team will tell you, I hear them say it, well, Angie, you love us. Like, you love our families. And we talk about teams are like family. They have dysfunction. There are days you may not care for someone, but at the core of it, and that's what the heart of Leadercast is. It's why people either love us and they bleed for us. Like, we had a show yesterday on Facebook Live, and two of our host site leaders were like, in 1 week we went with Leadercast, and that week we had all our sponsorships for the year at this chamber. And they're like, we love what you do. And when we mess up, I put that out there too. So who we are at Leadercast and the platform we have has to have leadership that exemplifies our foundation. And what John Maxwell stands for, when he founded it, when he sat there and laid those pillars and put footers in the ground, I think that for me to be transparent is just part of that foundation. It's part of our heart.
It's cool. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So now I get a good sense of how you show up. Now, how did your time in your week change when you became the leader of the business? Because I'm sure now you were doing stuff that you're like, never had to do that before.
I never had to do that.
And so, your kind of sandbox expanded in a pretty big way.
It did. And we run really lean. So our parent company's out of Boston. And so we have shared services out of there.
You didn't say that right. It's
Boston.
There it is.
There we go. We're out of Boston. So we have a team up there. Our controller works out of that. I have a great relationship with her. But things that I had to expand on. And so I am the HR person. I mean, she steps in and supports, but I've learned across the organization and running very lean. A lot of that at the beginning felt like, and I'm great at prioritizing, but my prioritization list was like out of hand. I had like 12 things on there, and we know you can't do that well. If you look at my planner now, it's 3. And that's how it should be. And so I start
Hold
every
on.
day
I
with
want
that.
everyone to hear that. Can you say it one more time?
Yes, you can only have 3 priorities and make them actually happen. And so mine every day starts with looking at those 3 priorities, and I look across the organization to ensure that each department is aligned to my priorities, as well as then I look at events. So I look at everything like a grid, and how are we doing on some things have to move up. Right now with our live event, those things clearly move up, but those 3 priorities still are aligned to that particular event. So that's a craft that I've really had to hone in on. And since the beginning of the year, I've gotten that. Managing up to investors. I was at, anytime someone wanted to call me or text me and ask me a question about something or something that they saw on the website, I was constantly available. I still am available now. However, I manage my calendar and I make a weekly 10-minute call, and that's available. And if I don't get a call, then that goes off and that goes to the next week. So I started realizing that I have to manage my time, and that was hard to say, wait a second, I'm in charge. This starts here. So
on the Workplace Therapist show, we say that's setting boundaries.
Yep. It is. And I listened to Dr. Henry Cloud's book on necessary endings and listened to that. That's on Audible, so I can refer to that all the time. So that was really important for me as I've made some decisions with the team. What's gotten so difficult and for me in the leadership role was to amass my true first executive team. And I had some missteps, not that people aren't great people and have great professional careers, but I made some hiring decisions that were too early in the cycle of transformation. And so I've learned from that as well that you've got to really not look for the right candidate, but how is their skill set, but also how is their temperament for that time in the transformation. So you can't have someone that is so fantastic, and I've had that. I had someone that brought an incredible skill set, but timing-wise, it was too early. And so I've learned from that as well on how you really have to take some time and understand. So learning a transformative time frame and what that looks like has been my greatest learning curve since being at Leadercast. And now I get it, and we're trending up where we need to trend. I mean, to do a digital transformation of a 18-year-old, 19-year-old company that we should have done it 5 years ago has been a lot. And our website just went, so wow. I can go on that forever.
So leading a transformational effort.
Yeah.
Building an executive team. Setting boundaries.
Yes.
Managing investor relationships.
Yep.
Managing that fine line between authentic and executive presence. And all while doing it in somewhat of a lonely seat.
Yes.
Sounds like quite a challenge.
And so now, if you can't see me but hear me, I'm sitting in the corner sucking my thumb. No. Wow, that's a lot. But you know what's interesting is my executive coach, and I do have that personal advisory board, just walked me through this exercise. 4 weeks ago, to be completely transparent, came back from a wedding and felt like my confidence, for whatever reason, got out of kilter. And so I sent a note out on Monday morning to my executive coach and then 3 people that I say are my army, so people that pray and meditate for me. And I was like, I don't know what happened to me, but I'm just like not in a good place. And so my executive coach said, okay, I'll call you tonight. We have this scheduled. So I drove home, and in that hour, I think it was a godsend that I was stuck in traffic. She made me walk through all of the things that you just described. And she said,
all the things that you've kind of overcome and accomplished.
All of the things, the digital transformation, the 18 months in, the plan, the strategy, like, okay, and talk to me about that. What would you rate that? And I sat there, and she says, so now tell me, why did you feel no confidence today? And I sat there and I said, I don't know. And she goes, let's talk about what triggered it. And so we walked through what potentially triggered it. But she said the trigger did not take those things away. And I think as leaders, that's what we have to identify and sit in the moment where it doesn't feel good, but it never negates what the realities are.
Yeah.
And that was the exercise that she took me through.
It's a beautiful exercise.
It was. It was. But
so let's say, and this will, Isaac, how much time do we have left? 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Okay. So that's enough time for one last big question.
Yes.
So let's say we could go back in time, okay, and you could go talk to yourself and really talk to any leader that is now taking on one of these roles. So you're talking to her or him, and they're ascending into the seat. What advice would you give on where to start?
Great question. I would tell people the greatest thing I've learned is to sit in the discomfort. So if for any of you that are listening to this and you are feeling uncomfortable, you feel like there's this season, something's not working out, and this applies both personally and professionally, is sit in the disturbance and sit in silence. Because I wish after that reduction in force, I would have slowed down a bit, not slowed down in getting a job, because I went 141 interviews in 14 weeks and had 3 job offers. But if I would have sat more in the falseness of some things about myself, I would have gotten to where I am now. Now, we all know timing is just how it's supposed to be. I was supposed to go through all of that. But I tell my team a lot, you got to sit in that. You know, I've had some people who make a mistake and they'll come to me and I'm like, okay, all right, are you okay? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, I'm going to let you sit with this tonight. So let's pause this conversation. All is well, but you need to think about this. You need to sit in this, and then let's talk about it. Because there's value in feeling discomfort. And I wish that I would have been okay with that more, but I had to get to do some work on myself. And that's where I think in the world we live in, that's everything's about, give me a like on social media, give me this, give me that, is we've done a disservice to allowing people to feel uncomfortable. And I'm not talking from a manipulative
I'm
mind.
tracking you. Yeah,
okay. Yeah. In no way. You know that's nothing how I operate.
No, I think you're talking about the growth that comes from discomfort.
Yeah.
That resilience that comes from discomfort.
Yeah, and I know that for me, that the design of me going through that personal break of like almost spirit and confidence, I call it a femoral break, because if somebody breaks their femur, it's pretty significant. But isn't it perfect that I was supposed to be leading an organization that through transformation, we had to break. I mean, we had to leave some things behind of our brand and work on this refresh and who we are. And that was just, and that's where I'll say to the team, this is hard right now. You're pushing a cinder block through the wall, and it's hard. We just had this conversation as a team yesterday, and we had last night at 10:59, we had one of our highest sales day. So from a team that we kicked that off at 9 o'clock, talking about Corona, and we talked about Nashville, and we talked about there's just an ominous dark thing out there right now. That team came together and had just an amazing night. Till 10:59, people were closing deals out. They were on fire.
That's fantastic.
But we were willing to sit in that discomfort yesterday and talk about
That's
it.
a great piece of advice. So I ask all my guests this question. I asked you this the last time you were on the show. I don't know if you remember your answer, but what is one life hack you have for us to help us live a life more free from dysfunction? It could be personal or professional.
Still have passion and still have love, but put your hands up and out and don't hold on to anything, because the true things will come back to you, both professionally and personally.
That sounds like that's like a meme or something. I don't know.
I don't know.
Bumper sticker. That's really good. You're an absolute gift.
Thank you, man.
I'm so glad you got to come on the show.
Thank you. Always love being here and supporting you. And now I'm glad that I got to meet the better half.
You did.
That is here running things. Emily, it's so great to meet you.
That's exactly right. Actually taking a picture right now.
Yay.
So if people want to learn more about Leadercast, of course, go to the event, sign up.
Check out our website, leadercast.com. You'll see our refreshed brand. For those of you that find any missing links or bad links, we know we're working on it like any big launch. So I'll put that out there. But we're just super excited. Come see us on May 7th. If you would like to do something internally based on your company having travel restrictions, we are there with you. We can do that simulcast or rebroadcast. And we are also giving free content to the CDC in the situation, the time they're putting into it, that we are partnering with them to tell them thank you for keeping us all safe.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. Yeah.
Thanks, man.
That's great. Yeah. And thanks for listening and watching the show. Of course, if you're not listening, why not? Download on iTunes, Stitcher, other places you can get podcasts, and subscribe and review the show, because it's important that other folks find us. And if you want additional resources, of course, you can check out my website, theworkplacetherapist.com. And until our next show, have a great week and an awesome life. The Workplace Therapist Show is brought to you by The Worksmiths, a leadership development firm specializing in executive coaching, team retreats, and leadership education. Contact The Worksmiths for all of your leadership development needs.